Welcome to Basement Tales with Sam Jackman, Charlie Einsman, Ed Grass, and Sandra Delancey. We have fun telling crazy but true stories about turning the worst possible property disasters into bags of money. Along the way, we'll pass along some important lessons to help you make cash on real estate. Sam and Charlie walked away from cubicle hell 25 years ago. Starting with no property, they created their own Clear Sky group of companies, sold hundreds of houses, bought dozens of rentals, and made millions in hard money loans. I'm Ed, a big firm litigator until muscular dystrophy made me find a hobby other than suing people. I miss it. Sandra's the normal person here with a real job plus some rentals. Her decades of friendship with the group, from office flunkies to property gurus, might help keep us all humble and focused on learning something. I wouldn't count on it. What are we going to talk about this week? I've been having fun with fraudsters today, but
Ooh, should we
yeah.
talk
That's
about
a good. That's a good one.
is this too
We
early
can't
in the
use a
game?
name. We can't use a name.
No, but I can use a method. I can tell you that this is pretty fascinating. Um, People, I think, the way it's tied to real estate is people who are too smart by half. Um, how do I put this? So normally, when you do the sort of property things that you guys do, particularly fix and flips, it's not a bad idea to have a single LLC. So you'll see a lot of companies will have, 1234 Jones Street, Washington LLC, or whatever it might be. They set up that sole use. And now the lenders like it because if the LLC defaults on its mortgage on that one property, it's relatively easy to go through bankruptcy and to seize foreclose or seize the LLC or whatever the circumstance might be. But it's also, more importantly, it's good for the builder, because if they have, or fix and flipper, if they have one, two, or three or four properties, you don't want to find asbestos on a property and get sued into the ground, and lose five properties instead of one property, or somebody falls on the site or whatever the case may be, and all of that's legitimate. But what people have to do, though, is honor the corporate form. If you're going to have a couple different, you have your personal account for your hair salon, and your, what is Grubhub and whatever else, that's your personal stuff. You really want to keep that personal, and you want to keep your LLC separate. There's the concept of piercing the corporate veil. If basically the LLC is just set up as fakery for one of the reasons I mentioned, or more nefarious reasons, a court can look through that and even go after your personal assets if your business goes down. So in any event, that's the normal process. I've had the fun of running into some people who've taken that a little bit far, and they basically set up a bunch of LLCs and then move around the ownership of the LLC. So if you have a couple partners in an LLC and one of them gets into financial trouble, maybe they manufacture documentation as to who really owns the LLC, and start trying to move funds around like that to hide them in
What do you mean
bankruptcy.
manufacture? What do you mean manufacture documentation? What's that?
Yeah, well, there's there's some companies out there I've come across that some others have used. None here, thankfully, because I'd yell at you. Plus, I know you wouldn't do that sort of thing. But where, how do I put this? To do an LLC, you have to have depending on the state, you have to have an operating agreement, but it's all pretty pro forma paperwork. I'm sure like LegalZoom and some of those has some of the paperwork. It's not that hard to file and put together. You probably want to get a lawyer if you've never done it before, but it's not a ton of money just to set up a basic LLC. But like I say, you have one, two, three, four, whatever I said, Jones Street LLC, and that then purchases one, two, three, four Jones Street, the property. And you take out your fix and flip loan with Clear Sky or another hard money lender, and it's one, two, three, four Jones Street LLC that takes out the loan. Well, the hard money lender's fine with that because they just want to have the asset. They've assessed that that asset will protect the loan, and everybody's good to go. Well, who owns 1234 Jones Street LLC? And this is what money launderers do, perhaps our former president and others, where the beneficial owner of the LLC, let's say it's Tom and Mary, and they each own 50% of 1234 Jones Street LLC. Nobody outside of the LLC really knows that. That documentation might get disclosed in the loan process. It might not, but 3 days after the loan is originated, Tom might sell his share to Mary. Mary might sell her full ownership to a third party. A lot of things can happen in the background. Well, what I've come across is some people who allegedly shift around that ownership of the LLC depending on who they want to claim owns it. They might claim one
Should I
ownership
be taking
structure.
notes right now, Ed? Should I take notes on how to do this? I
No,
feel
no,
like you're giving
don't
me
do
the
this.
secret.
Well,
Don't.
no, don't take notes on how to do it because we're about ready to tell you how we can research it down and find you.
Right, right. Well,
And find your note and find your notes.
yeah, and up to this
Yeah.
up to this point, it's fine to take notes because again, all of this is perfectly legitimate. If you
This sounds
do
very
it,
legitimate.
it's all legitimate. The problem is it can be misused. So, and with these LLCs, let's say all goes well, you sell the property and there's $100,000 of income. Tom and Mary each get their $50,000, and then they each report that on their own income taxes. It's sort of a pass-through entity, and all the accountants out there can explain that, but it's just a protective sort of entity. So that's all fine. Well, Tom and Mary, let's say they're crooks, and neither of them reports their gain on their taxes because they don't do a K-1, that sort of tax return, or they don't report it as a pass-through. Or maybe Tom's had a lot of expenses that year, so Tom will report the whole $100,000 on his taxes, and Mary will report nothing, even though she gets half the money. So that's one sort of fraud that the tax fraud, frankly, that some people could do. And then let's say Tom gets himself in some financial trouble, and he has to go into bankruptcy. Well, Tom's 50% ownership of that LLC can have a lien placed against it, so that a creditor, a personal creditor, can actually reach in and get that LLC ownership. And so Tom may say, I really trust Mary, and Mary does the same for me when things get tight. I'm going to give 100% ownership to Mary. And I'm going to say in bankruptcy or some other location, dealing with my creditors, whatever. Oh, no, I sold that 1234 Jones Street. I don't own that anymore. Well, you don't have to report that change of ownership to the state. And so, the true LLC owner could be a Russian oligarch, or could be a fraudster. And there's work now. I think there may have been something in the recent defense bill and some other things to require those owners to be disclosed. And certainly lenders may require it, but it's still going to be a while till that happens. So lenders can, particularly, let's say a lender has gotten a personal guarantee on some loans, that can cause a real problem to collect that debt. And this is one reason why hard money lenders don't want to deal with credit scores and really anything else. As long as they've got that lien on the property and there's enough equity in the property to wait for delays with bankruptcy or whatever, everything will work out fine for the lender. But it can get a lot more complicated if you think you can rely on some of that paperwork. Then of course the other thing that people are starting to do is putting some of those profits and some of that money in cryptocurrency. So if you're trying to
So
track
is that
down,
something you've seen lately yet? Is that something you saw today?
I've run across such things. Let's put it that way. It's certainly And this is it's both wrong to do things illegal ethically and morally. It's also not a good idea because we leave so many digital footprints in our lives. You think, well, nobody knows really what's going on with that LLC, and the IRS isn't going to pay attention, and I'll just say oops if the IRS catches me and pay a fine, and until somebody pays attention, because there's ways to find out the footprints of these things going on. If somebody takes money from a bank account and sends it to Coinbase, one of these cryptocurrency purses, that transaction is going to be out there. You can see that money moving, and then you can go to the person and say, okay, Tom, you put $50,000 into Coinbase. Where's that cryptocurrency? And the bankruptcy trustees now, they ask, in addition to the specific assets. Funny, the forms don't mention it because they're fairly old. They should mention it as an asset type, but the trustees will typically say, in the last 2 years, have you put any money in cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I don't even know all the names of them. I'm too old to know more than what I just said. So the moral of the story is, do the right thing with your properties and set up an individual LLC, or maybe, you might have a development company. There's reasons to maybe have a couple, but document that stuff. Keep the LLC separate. Don't take money out of one LLC to pay for another without documenting a loan or putting the money back at so that you can explain it. You have to be able to, if you can't explain where $50,000 went into cryptocurrency, all's fine and dandy legally until somebody looks into it. And I've been a little astonished by that. And I guess people do these things because a lot of times they get away with it, but the times they don't are pretty bad. And if you hopefully you're building up, let's say you're getting your very first rental, and you start to set this stuff up and have an LLC, and maybe you do that yourself, or you have an accountant help you with it. Uh, Learn that stuff and follow it, because you want to be able to say to the judge someday, or to somebody else, the IRS, and say, here's why I did what I did. They're all legitimate reasons, because I mean, the IRS will just beat you down if you if they pay attention, and they may not. And
Yeah,
I'm
and
glad.
what's the biggest reason why somebody is in this kind of a problem? Because what they owe some money personally or something?
Right. Yeah, they're trying to shuffle assets around to hide them from personal creditors, from business creditors. For example, um, somebody might take out a loan on property A, and they have no intention of really renovating property A. They convince a hard money lender or somebody else to give them a loan, and they're really putting it into property B. So property A, they go, oops, well, 1, 2, 3, 4 Jones Street didn't work out, and they collapse it, and the lender takes it in a foreclosure, and the lender loses money on it. But property B is beautifully renovated and has a lot of equity, and then the people are able to make a profit on property B and stick the lender with the problems with
Right,
property A. And
right.
and this is why I think, you guys, as hard money lenders, or anybody out there is thinking about lending somebody money on real estate, you got to make sure you're in the right lien position, and you've got a plan. If you think the property is worth $500,000, but it's really worth $300,000, you're going to have a lot of trouble. Um,
Is
so
is there a reason why someone, and I know that you guys probably, I don't know if you see more people with or without the LLC set up when you do your hard money lending, but first of all, does an investor or new investors, any investor, have to get an LLC? Is it more beneficial for them to get the LLC, or can they come to you directly with their personal,
But
name
we
with an
have them do
LLC?
an LLC, so it's a business to business loan for sure.
So you require an LLC?
Yeah.
We require some sort of entity. It doesn't have to necessarily be an LLC. Just
Mhm.
because on that front, we don't do any consumer oriented loans. So
Mm.
we've got to keep everything business to business because in our case, we are an asset based lender. So the only thing that protects us is the value of the asset itself. So that's how we're protected. And so it's got to be a commercial to commercial loan because we don't want to get caught up in these consumer type events. It's harder to foreclose on a consumer. In some jurisdictions, consumers get access to mediation, and so they can really prolong this process. And so for us, our only line of defense is the actual asset itself. And so we want to be able to grab that asset as soon as possible because we need to be able to execute on that asset and get our money back.
But
Right.
Sandra, you raise a good point about what personal name means. So an entity will sign documents, but in some jurisdictions, such as Virginia and Maryland, we get a personal signature on it as well. Now that loan is not to them, but it's a guaranteed by them as a natural person, as well as guaranteed by their LLC. In the district, don't do it because in the district, it'll trigger the consumer lending laws if their name even appears naturally as a guarantee. So we only have business guarantees in the city. So in Virginia and Maryland, if we have someone who's, say, a fraudster, and then they pierce their corporate veil, they've also signed it personally. So now we've got them coming and going. And Ed is referring to one particular situation where someone has done just those things in order to avoid paying their loan back. They thought that they
Yeah,
just not pay a loan back at all.
yeah,
Right. At least
but
that's our sense of where that's going. And it sure it takes some effort to dig this out. But you ask a good question, and Sandra, and it's very interesting what Sam and Charlie they were talking about that. And still think it's interesting for our listeners who are maybe starting out getting loans.
Sure.
You want to make sure that your hard money lender knows what they're doing,
yeah,
because you don't want them messing with consumer loans or your traditional thing is Citibank. It gives you a loan for your own residence. Well, that triggers just a ton of regulatory requirements, and there's nothing wrong with that. In many ways, it helps get the interest rate down and whatever. But a private lender can get themselves in big trouble by issuing a loan like that because there are fines and penalties for not registering as that type of lender and taking whatever courses. They have enormous compliance departments at these banks to do those commercial loans, private loans. But so a hard money lender who's doing the commercial loan, as these guys said, it has to be business to business, and you don't want a fly by night hard money lender. There are those out there who want to default you, right? They're
yeah,
looking for you to be late one time and then rack up as many fees as possible, and seize the property. Um, so you really, like in anything else, you want to know who you're dealing with and see that they're handling things correctly. There's a American Association of Private Lenders that sort of tracks a lot of those laws and what you can and can't do in various states. Like California, I think, is a whole thing about how you do hard money loans that I have no knowledge about, and these guys may have some, but AAPL tracks that. So if you want to
yeah.
learn more about private lending, I think they've got some good free things on their website. Funny, if you type in AAPL, that's the stock ticker for Apple Computer.
Apple.
So this is a different AAPL if you want to.
But just on the other side of things, we actually, as a hard money lender, love to deal with single use entity LLCs
Mhm.
because, as you've educated us in the past, Ed, is that we don't want to get caught up in a bankruptcy court with an LLC that has a lot of assets because that will prolong any type of bankruptcy protection. So, we like single use entity LLCs for our hard money because makes us it makes us for the ability to grab back the asset a lot easier in case the LLC owners want to go down the bankruptcy road. Now, I don't think that's ever happened to us, has it? With a single use LLC, I don't think they've ever filed bankruptcy on any of our loans. Ed, I don't remember, right?
No, there's been a few. Usually, like any bankruptcy, well, not like, but it's a lot of times they might do that just to slow the process down. If a hard money lender is being unreasonable, or they just want to slow it down, they can file bankruptcy for that single use LLC. But there are special rules that make the bankruptcy go much more quickly, that may even the lender or whoever else may be able to get the bankruptcy stay lifted. For those of out there who've seen or been involved in a private bankruptcy or commercial bankruptcy, simply filing bankruptcy stops everything. So, Charlie, I know you've seen a million times on foreclosures. The morning of a foreclosure, a homeowner or a company will file bankruptcy to stop the proceeding, and typically what it does is just delays things, and it raises the cost potentially for the lender. But at the end of the day, if they can't, well, and sometimes people do get their act back together in bankruptcy. I mean, may have a short-term problem, and bankruptcies can be right and fix things. And hopefully, if you're in a reasonable situation with a reasonable lender, they're going to want you to be successful. You can't expect too much. They're also going to want their money. But if you can approach your lender and work things out with them, you can have a good result from that. So yeah, we have seen some single use LLCs that have gone bankrupt, but I can't think of any where it's made a difference from the underlying situation. Either it was
Yeah.
fixable or it wasn't fixable. Um,
A
and
question, a question for the new investors out there, like, well, intermediate level investors like me. So a single use LLC, I bought properties before and I do not have an LLC. I've never, set up an LLC for, the single use. I just set up an LLC for my property, so I will start using that at some point. But a single use LLC versus what, multiple use LLC, and why is the single use LLC more desirable? I heard Charlie say because you can just kind of pinpoint that when you don't have to go through all of the holdings of a LLC that has multiple. So what does that mean for me? And, it sounds kind of intimidating for a new investor to go and have to set up an LLC just to purchase a property or just to
Yeah,
get a hard
there's some
money.
nuances there too. You could sell your LLC that has the asset inside it rather than sell the asset itself. So there's some nuances there, and Charlie, you might want to talk to.
The biggest nuance is this, and we tell people all the time, and the way we have our business set up is that, like, for example, an LLC will give you certain protection just based upon the LLC from individuals, right? So if you get sued, then they're suing the LLC, and the individuals within that LLC usually are protected. The problem with getting many single-use LLCs is basically a tax issue, because each separate LLC that you have to set up has to have a separate tax return every single year that that LLC is in existence. So sort of
Tax
the
IDs too, right? So I need a tax ID for
Oh
each one
yeah,
of them.
yeah, yeah. Each LLC has a different tax ID. So kind of the way we do it is we have one LLC, let's say Clear Sky Properties, and that holds all of our fix and flips and all of our rentals. But what we also have is we have an umbrella insurance policy protecting us in case that LLC gets sued, maybe by an angry tenant, maybe a tenant trip and falls down the steps due to, some rug issues or something. They sue us. Well, we have an umbrella policy set up just for that purpose. And so the reason why we have Clear Sky Properties, have all those properties underneath Clear Sky Properties, is that our tax situation is much easier, if that's actually a truthful statement, because our tax situation isn't anything as easy as that. But that's why we do it that way. So if you do set up different single-use LLCs for each property, you are going to have to file different tax returns until that LLC is defunct, and you have to then label it as such. And usually that's at the end of a fix and flip exercise.
So once
right.
I fix and flip it, I just shut it down. I don't
Yeah.
sell it to you guys. You don't take it over or anything like,
Yeah, that's right. So you're going to have probably usually in that case,
through
you might
proper
have,
channels.
yeah, you might have two tax filings, right? So that single use LLC could have had a fix and flip event, but it might go over the course of a December to a January, which means it has to file a tax return in the year that of the inception. It fix and flips, let's say it fix and flips into the next year. It then has to file a tax return into the next year, and then you end the LLC, and then no more tax filings. And that's kind of what Ed was hinting at earlier with one of these folks that we're chasing down with multiple LLCs, is that one of the things that they're not doing is they're not filing an LLC, I mean, a tax return for all their LLCs. So they're actually skirting the IRS by not filing these tax returns. And so they can get in trouble doing that as well. And so in our case, it's just a lot more simpler to have one LLC own all these different properties so that we don't have to file, 60, 70 different tax returns every year for each different LLC.
Yeah, and this is a good point to interject that the everybody's mileage may vary, right? There are good and bad reasons for each of these things. Somebody like you, Sandra, starting out, I think it's worth either the person learning about it, and there are a lot of great resources online, or getting a small local lawyer. Any business lawyer should be able to do this for not much money, to start up an LLC, and any accountant that you have to do taxes can definitely do the tax accounting for an LLC. And the protections are so helpful for like your perfect example of, we've talked a bit about your one rental. I know you have more than one, but if that was your first and only rental, it's nice to have that protection. If you have a crazy tenant that makes all sorts of claims, if you've set it up right, maybe it's cost you a couple $1,000s to set it up, but when they sue you for $40 million for whatever, you're going to have really good liability protection. And
Hey,
then
that's a great segue. What about your rental, Sandra?
Oh my gosh.
I cut you off, Ed. I
Oh,
cut
it's
you off.
okay.
I got buried in the LLC stuff. I couldn't.
I'm sorry,
Lawyers talk by the lawyers charge by the minute, so you have to
I
stop
segued
me.
it. I segued
Right.
Ed.
But Ed brought up a good point. $2,000 is a lot of money for someone who's starting out. So, you're
Right.
thinking, or you're saying, you can get a lawyer to, set these paper, set the stuff up for you for a reasonable cost. I'm thinking like $299, and here he is. He's saying he's saying a
Okay,
couple $1,000. I
that's
want the
funny.
199 lawyer, or I'm
No,
going
you
to
don't
legal
want the
Zoom.
one. No.
Right, but to Ed's point, you can go to LegalZoom and find these
Yeah.
documents, and you can file them
Yeah.
yourself, and you can get the
Yeah.
articles of incorporation and file it
You
yourself, and it
can,
all
but the
is
day
that.
that
But
the day you actually need them, that day that you need them, like you didn't get a good value, you'll really remember it. You'll
It's
remember.
funny, I really don't know the answer
that's
to
a
that.
lot of money.
I don't. It's funny. I don't know the answer to that. I would think. I mean, I'm skewed because I'm a lawyer and I understand how to read these things. It may be that you can get a reasonable, non-fraudulent package, through LegalZoom or whatever. It's not that hard. And we'll go back to the rental in a second. You go to the IRS website and get the EIN. You
You're
Yes.
missing one thing. You don't have
What is
a
that?
relationship with a lawyer, right? So let's that you have your LLC and you've set it up in an okay way, and then you have a problem. Then you have to take your okay way thing to your new lawyer who doesn't want to see your legal Zoom thing. He immediately thinks you're a 199 customer, and that you not only will you not pay for any quality in the past, you won't pay for it in the future.
Nope.
To unwind these problems that other people created. And believe me, to get the attention of someone who's talented to help you solve your problems is really, really hard. It's actually what I wanted to talk to about terrible industry practices this week, but we're going to skip that. But if you don't have your team lined up in advance, including your lawyer, where are you when there's a real problem? Like, there are problems every day that require lawyers.
Oh, Sam.
And we have those relationships in place. We've paid for them for things that we thought were useless, and yet not to you, but
I know you're not
people,
talking about me.
we've paid people for what we felt were useless and overpriced activities. But the day that we needed them, they were there to answer the phone. They got responded to the person who had questions. And the faster they get to it, the faster you come to a resolution. You're less distracted. It costs you overall.
Better answer.
You have a better answer. The thing where you're saving money with a lawyer is no savings. It's just, it's not a single transaction. If you're doing this repeatedly, you're going to have more legal interactions and you'll need a lawyer.
Ed, can you help me out? Can you start something like maybe $4.99, not $1.99, $4.99?
Well, it's something.
Those of us who are just starting up, who haven't been Clear Sky Financial for the last 25 years.
As you know, I'm retired. That's my
Ed, come
answer.
on.
Anytime anybody tries to hire me, is I'm retired. The
I thought it was I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer.
Yeah, well, that's for the podcast. That's in
Okay.
person. I just ignore people. It's much easier. But but
Yeah.
but but no, I mean it's fascinating. I mean, Sam makes a great point, and here I am, the lawyer, a little bit deprecating what lawyers do. But it is like a plumber, right? When your property springs a horrible leak on New Year's Eve at 10 o'clock at night, it's nice to be able to actually know the lawyer and call them and they say, okay, let me walk you through where the shutoff valve is and whatever the having that stable of contractors. So maybe you get it, you just do one property and you figure that's all I'm ever going to do. But hopefully we're Charlie and Sam's pathway here is once you get this down and you have your stable, you start making more and more money by repeating this, and you
And
can
I'm
sort of
making
largely
more money.
reuse.
I will pay for the $2,000 lawyer.
Yeah, I don't. I'm going to look and see what it really costs, but I can't. I mean, there's got to be only a
What's
few
it cost
thousand.
not to have a lawyer? What's it cost not to have a relationship?
Sam,
Everything.
you've been doing this too long.
Sandra, tell us how your rental is.
You
Tell
don't
Yeah, right. So
understand.
let's hear that. Are there any legal problems yet, or just tenant
No, I
problems?
don't have any legal problems, but I'm going to bring up my outside job in risk management. So there are a lot of people who, don't think that risk would ever manifest itself. So, do I need to pay for a $2,000 lawyer? No, not if I never get sued. So I'm going to go with the risk of being sued is very low.
Yeah, I would stay with that
My
risk.
my
Hey, I'm on
inherent
your
risk is
team.
low. Thank you, Charlie. My
Oh yeah,
inherent risk
I'm
is
on your
very
side.
low. I'm going to put in some great controls. So this is some risk
Yeah,
management terminology. Inherent risk is going to
yeah.
be low.
Well,
My my
you tell that risk
control
management when you
this.
start owning a
controls
bunch
are
of
going to be
things.
high. I'm going to put in the right rugs,
Okay,
and I'm
I
not
love you.
people slipping and
Yeah,
falling. I'm fixing things and all of that.
I'm on
So
your
controls
team.
are
Well, it's kind of like when you see those
On
dark
Team
storm
Sandra.
clouds out in the distance, you think, I'm just running out for to 7-Eleven. I'll be fine. And then the next thing you know, the lightning's crashing down around you with no umbrella, and it's
That's
it's a
different. You see
derecho
it
coming
coming.
through.
That's different. I know it's coming. The guy on Channel 4 told me it's coming.
Well,
I'm
that's the
talking about
problem
like when
is
I
that
get in my car to drive, do I put my seatbelt on? Am I
right.
going to have an accident today? No, no, I'm not. Probably
Uh,
not.
And no,
So I
this is
don't put my
actually
seatbelt on.
it's fascinating beyond lawyers because it is true. Some people are risk takers with this
Yes,
stuff.
it's a
And
risk thing.
the thing is, if you have the LLC, you may be a little safer to take risks. If you buy a property, it was Jad, I guess, who, you buy a property as an individual, you then refinance it and then put it in an LLC. Depending on which order you do those things, then you can get better loans, and
That's
but you
true.
may have a period of some risk with LLCs. So but it really is interesting. Can you get away with doing the plumbing yourself? Well, if you're kind of handy and you know how to put in drywall and you fix your own house, you probably can do some plumbing on your own house. And none of this legal stuff from my perspective is complicated. Maybe
Right.
from you
I can be a lawyer.
probably could learn it.
I can be a plumber. I can be a lawyer.
You can
I
do
can
it.
be,
uh
whatever.
You
I can
can
do
well,
do
it.
so
it. You can do it.
I can go on YouTube, find a podcast that will teach me how to do all this stuff.
Speaking of, I got a great story. That's funny that you say that. Go to YouTube and find a
Let's get to
podcast.
Charlie's story and then we'll get to my rental.
All
Charlie,
right.
what's your basement
Well,
tell?
go to YouTube and find a podcast. So Curtis, he was younger. He might have been maybe 16 or 17, and he was running low on tire air, and so he needed to fill up his tire, and so he had no idea how to fill his tire up with air. So he actually went to YouTube, found a podcast on how to fill your tire up with air. So YouTube
Yes,
has it all, evidently.
everything. You can learn
Yeah,
everything on YouTube,
and
including how to
also has this podcast too.
lawyer. Yes,
Yeah, podcast.
be a
But you
lawyer.
don't want to be, you don't want to get into the lawyer world. Let me tell you, because I'll tell you another story. Um, it doesn't matter what you do, who you know, how much money you have. Lawyers hate you. They don't want to do any work on your behalf. So you have to understand that no matter what you do. So we had a deal that we were supposed to do. It was just a simple foreclosure sale. Somebody that we, owed us a little bit of money, and just allowed us to foreclose on their property. As a matter of fact, they had a single use entity LLC, and they actually tried to, I guess they actually bankrupted this single entity use LLC. Well, finally, that came out of bankruptcy court because, of course, they didn't file the appropriate paperwork. And we went ahead and, tried to take the property back. Well, a third party bidder bought it at a foreclosure auction. Well, this particular transaction was supposed to close in 2 weeks because when you bid at a foreclosure sale, you have 14 days to close the sale. Well, that buyer who we knew, who has a lot of money, was ready to close within his 2 week time frame. So let's say, for simplicity's sake, the auction happened on the 8th of the month. Well, it's 14 days, 22nd. Well, that deal was supposed to be closed on the 22nd. Well, we had two different attorneys on both sides, one on the settlement company side, and then the other on
three attorneys.
Three. Who's the
Three.
third? Oh,
So
three.
the foreclosing attorney who helped us was not licensed in the jurisdiction, so he hired a trustee who was licensed in the jurisdiction, who's the second attorney. And then the third attorney is the one who's representing the buyer. So we've got three attorneys and no one wanting to work.
Right.
So,
Nobody wanting to work. All anybody wants to do is blame the other one, and they want to blame COVID. They want to blame COVID. They want to blame everything, except nobody wants to take responsibility to do their job. And you ask the question, well, isn't
so
that
this work is like one piece of paper. It's one.
Yeah, but not only that, but we have had, with this one particular attorney, we've had almost 20 years of a relationship with this attorney. The other one is kind of newer to the game. He's newer with us, but at least goes over a year and a half of relationship. And so that didn't mean anything because now the 8th, the 22nd has passed, the 29th has passed. We're going to go 30 days to close a simple transaction that should have closed in 2 weeks. And oh, by the way, it's not a title abstract issue, looking up a title work, because I could go do that myself and find the title in less than 5 minutes. It's none of these issues. It's just that nobody wants to work. So it doesn't matter how much experience you have out there. You're just going to have to deal with the attorneys and deal with their slowness. And that's just part of the game. And
Yeah, you got to stay out of it if you can.
And you want me to
wanna
pay
stay
for
out of
this.
it. Huh?
Yeah, then you got to pay
$1,000
for it
a
too.
non-working attorney. Yeah, right.
My brethren have to eat. I mean,
Yeah, but they need to work too.
yeah, but it's not like Sam and Charlie like to work. I mean, the whole idea, if you set this up well, you have fun finding some of these properties, you make other people do the work and they pay the rental fees or whatever.
I have to say that it doesn't work at all like that. It's
no
work. It's
Darn.
a lot of work. I mean, Charlie and I are around the clock on these things.
Yeah.
We're on top.
On our passive investments that are supposed to be, every day's a day on the beach. It's around the clock.
All right. Well, I'm going to work up some empathy for you guys here being a lawyer. I want to hear about Sandra's latest on the whole rental front, because this is the part I can't handle, which is dealing with other human beings. I can send nasty lawyer letters, but Sandra, how's your situation going?
I need you to work up some network of lawyers that will work for $4.99. That's what you work up.
That's your limit. That's the maximum.
Just help me out, please help me out. So the property, I finally, got it rented. I think tomorrow I'm meeting the new tenants to get security deposit and.
So did you meet your objectives and your financial objectives?
I did not. So in this area, and I mentioned this when we were talking to Jad. Remember, Jad looked up the property and said, "Oh, you need to run, or I can just buy it from you," is what Jad offered, right? So I can pay you cash for it right now. Like,
Cash now, cheap.
Cash now, Jad. So no, we kept it. It's a great location. It's a great property. My whole concern was, it's my first house. The other things that I own are like the other properties I own are condos. So I'm kind of used to those being in contained buildings. This one just feels different. And it feels so new. It feels like a brand new place, it was fixed up very nicely. So I want somebody who's going to take care of it and all that stuff. And Jad kind of scared me. I tell you, that whole Jad, post and that podcast, listen to it. He'll scare you, but he'll also inspire you. So the couple that I have in there that I will be renting to are going to pay not quite what we consider market rates, but the DC Housing Authority has not gotten the market rates, updated for this year for that area. So it's below market rate what they're offering. And I'm like, for what they'll be paying, even though it's guaranteed money, every month, it's just not worth it to me to, have to deal with, the lower, amount that I would be getting from them. So I'm going to get something closer to market rate from, this couple that I'm renting to. And
So
and
did you
they
get within 10% of your target?
I'm within, yeah, 10, 12, more like 12, 12, 13%. But I'm happy. I know them. I know they're going to treat my property well. I told them, you'll get 2 years because I'm sure that DC is going to catch up with the market rate. So,
Yeah.
they're okay with that. So actually, and this is another thing, their credit is not great. So this is from, the last podcast that we had where Charlie was talking about, the middle, what is it, Charlie, the middle income divide where people are making a
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
the
money
middle
but still
class. It's
can't,
the middle class divide. Yep.
the middle class divide. So they're kind of in that middle class divide where they,
Yeah.
some just a couple of bobbles on the credit score and they can't, qualify for things like, they would love to buy a house, but right now they're going to have to clean up their credit. So they're going to treat my house like, their own home. So I'm pretty pleased about them being in there.
They may want to buy it from you.
They may want to buy it if they can clean up
Yeah.
their
No, I
credit.
think that's very bullish because, especially where your property is located on that part of DC, it's going to go nothing but up, up,
Mhm.
up, and up. That I mean, it's it's kind of like the suburban sprawl within urban, right? I mean, you're sprawling right into those communities. So
Yep.
18, 19, 2018, 2019. I mean, that's kind of where it's at right now, and that's where the sprawl's headed, and you can't do anything to stop it. You just want to. It's just going to go up.
And you have to think in terms of that you had some real savings there where you didn't have an agent involved and you rented it
Yeah,
yourself. You got it done.
that's true.
And they're going to be there a couple of years. That's solid all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that 1% rule that you guys were talking about and talk about with Jad, the few rentals I ever got really did not satisfy that, but they were okay. I mean, they pretty much were at least cash neutral to cash positive. But then every year with reasonable rent increases, even 2% or whatever,
Mhm.
that'll catch up fairly quickly. Then you don't have to do so much renovations, and you have hopefully people who do take reasonable care of it, and all of a sudden in 5 years you'll be rocking pretty good because the value of the property is going up. And so it can be a little frustrating at first. Maybe it's not ideal, but um hopefully if you keep the lawyers from being involved, then you're really doing
Yeah.
good.
I'm
Yeah.
not paying a lawyer. $2,000 is not happening. My my
Oh.
bottom line is yeah, I'm not making enough to pay a lawyer at this point. Maybe the next property.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
my thing is go out there and collect another one. Go find some more. I
mhm.
mean,
I
Yeah,
need another
definitely.
one.
get this going.
And plus, yeah, plus this year is going to be a good year for it. You'll see.
I'm trying to get a, Sandraville. So
Yeah, that's
that's
right,
my next
Sandraville.
thing. Trying to get a
I
little
would visit
I
Sandraville.
Sandraville. I think it would be run on time, it would be clean, it would not involve bad people who curse. That would
With
so
bad
I couldn't come.
mouths. Yes.
I
Cannot
Yeah,
come
couldn't
to my
come.
place. Can't come to Sandraville with that mouth ad.
that's right. No
Oh,
Sandraville. Well, I had a pretty good phone call today that was going to result in a lawyer, and this is called Schuylerville. So we'll call it Schuylerville. We got say Stacyville, Sanderville, now we have Schuylerville. So I got a call today, and I guess they had listened to our podcast on Jad about rentals, about this, about that.
Mhm.
And so this one young lady was talking about buying a Market Pro condo off of a wholesaler, and it was over there in Annandale. But the numbers actually look pretty good. It's like a 170 purchase. I think she might be getting it for 165. The rents on it were $1,800, and the condo fee was roughly $400. So it was about a $1,400 thing. It was not bad, and this would be her first rental. And it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo, and it's in pretty good condition. So she doesn't have to do any renovation work. And this will be her first rental property. Where it kind of went off the rails was that she wanted to get FHA financing for it. And so she was going to act like it was an owner occupied FHA loan to get that really, really low interest rate. And so I sort of held her up at the pass because I didn't want to have to use a lawyer to get involved in her first deal because she wasn't going to own or occupy it. So then what we went down is we just basically went through her financing options. And the best option for her was going to be, and she had 20% to put down. She didn't feel comfortable putting down 20%. But so one of the things that we had to do is we had to pull her out of this FHA world because she wanted to get an FHA loan in her personal name. But number one, she wasn't going to be an owner occupant. But number two, this was a deal that she was buying from a wholesaler. So there was a contract assignment as part of this deal. And no lender, VA, FHA, VHDA, or even conventional, I don't even know if they're going to allow an assignment contract as part of the deal because they want to make sure that you're buying it directly from the owner without an assignment. So there's no way they're going to fund that loan with an assignment. So basically that's what we talked about. And she has like a 750 credit score. So what we're going to end up doing with her is sort of like the JAD strategy in that we're going to go ahead and buy it for her. We're going to finance the purchase. She's going to get a tenant in there. And from the day that when she buys it, 45 days later, we're going to have her refinanced out with a rate and term. And so that's called Schuylerville. So
Why is she doing this though? I mean, why? Because she doesn't want to go conventional. She came to a hard
Oh,
money lender.
I think she wants to go conventional, but like
you
Charlie
can't.
said, and this is a perfect example. People don't realize some of the hangups. It's good if you can find somebody like Charlie or whoever who's been through the process to say, "Oh, I know what, you would think you might qualify for a VA loan or an FHA loan, but that's not how it works. This is not going to qualify for that. You're just going to go down that road and it's going to be a
Yeah.
mess. Here's
Yeah.
how you can do it legally by the rules and get
Yeah.
it to better financing, but you might have to do some interim things to
Yeah.
make that happen."
Yeah.
Um,
That's exactly right. No, by the way, she's 22, 23 years old.
wow.
And
That's
this will
nice.
and this will be
Very good.
her first rental. And that's why I bring up the term Schuylerville, just because, even for her, if she could buy a house, one house a year as a rental, 22, it gets her up to, let's say 42, one house a year. That's 20 houses by the time she's 42.
Oh
And
yeah,
so,
that's
and
nice.
so, yeah, by using this kind of strategy, she could hopefully maybe own 20 houses and then from 42 to 62, just spend the rest of her time collecting cash flows because then all those properties are eventually going to be paid off. And there you go. That's it.
That's
It's
it.
over. She's retired. Yeah, that's simple. So
Mhm.
Stacyville, Sandraville, and now hopefully we might have Schuylerville. So this is actually kind of exciting. Yeah.
Well, let's
Got
not
S
hopefully
Town
we
going
won't
on.
turn into our own country. We don't with no taxes and
No
IRS for
lawyers.
not one of those things. We like to do it legally. And that,
No taxes and no lawyers, Ed.
all right, I'll
No
try to keep my
lawyers in S Town.
and actually look at Charlie's a good example. Charlie, I was going to say probably, Charlie definitely knows more than I do about FHA and VA and all these different loan types and what you can do and can't do. So find people who know that stuff. They don't have to be lawyers to know that sort
Yeah.
of, you know,
Yeah.
thing. Weird nuances of LLCs, maybe LegalZoom will help you, maybe not, but that's another story. One thing I wanted to ask, maybe this is off topic or for another time, but we've talked a little bit about condos and houses and townhouses. Is it for a first time person, and Sandra mentioned, is it better to go after a condo? I mean, they don't cost that much to renovate. But I guess longer term, they don't appreciate as much. What do you think about that condo versus houses to build
Yeah,
a
matter of fact,
portfolio?
I literally had that conversation about 3 hours ago with somebody.
Huh.
And here's the answer to your question. The answer is yes. Okay.
I know what you
Here's the
mean.
reason.
Yeah.
The problem with condos is that you have to buy a condo that has a very affordable condo fee. And we were talking about this. Like, for example, this condo that you wanted to purchase is $400 and includes all the utilities except electric. Well, that's not bad.
Mhm.
Because and then there's this other condo she wanted to purchase that had $1,000 condo fee. And here's the problem. The problem is the higher the condo fee, the less likelihood you're going to get any appreciation, right? So it's going to appreciate, but it's not going to appreciate at a clip that you want it to be, like the $400 a month condo. The $400 a month condo will appreciate a lot faster than a condo that's paying $1,000 a month, because the people who are buying them are usually entry-level buyers. And when they go to buy it,
Right.
that affects their ability to pay on a loan, because that $1,000 gets put into the approval process of the loan. Thus, the appreciation is going to be stymied a little bit. Now, I would much rather buy townhouses than a condo. End of story. Townhouses and single families is where it's at. I would do that 100 times more than I'd buy a condo. Now, as long as the condo fee is low, I think condos could be great rentals. Now, just like we told Jad a couple podcasts ago, if the condo fee is, let's say, $100 a month, you had better throw up a red flag, because you want to make sure that your condo association is not insolvent. And so you can really do damage if you buy into a condo that has an insolvent condo fee, and those have happened. And so you just got to be careful. That's all. But we would rather buy single family homes first from a rental, townhouses second, condos third. But it's a very important that you look at that condo fee and make sure that that equates into your cash ability of that property, the cash flowingness of the property.
Hmm. Yeah, it reminds me. Also, there's a difference between a $300 and $400 condo fee that includes utilities and that doesn't include
Yeah, that's
utilities.
right.
That's great.
It's
Great point.
amazing. I didn't even really realize that at first when I was looking at some of these things. And then, of course, you can just look at the side of a condo building and think, I wonder how much maintenance that condo
Yep.
building from the 70s is going to need versus
Yep.
the 80s
Sure.
versus the 90s, even if their
That
Brought
numbers
up
are
a
all
good,
about the same.
but you brought up a good point too. It's also very important as an owner to understand what the condo fee includes, right? Because in this case, because the condo fee included all the utilities except electric, what's going on in this particular condo development is that the rents that they can charge are higher, right? So they can get away with a higher rent because what they're doing is they're selling it to their tenants. The fact that, oh, your water's included, your sewer's included, your cable's included,
That's
your
sweet as a
trash is
renter.
included,
Yeah.
everything is included, and that's sweet as a renter. So guess what? As a renter, you can, or as a landlord, you can charge a little bit more rent when the condo fees they include the utilities.
I know we're trying to wrap up, but one quick question though, about that, since we're talking about purchasing property. So if I'm looking to purchase my next property, I see a lot of what I consider reasonable deals around, the DMV area. They may be a little further out, Silver Spring, Maryland, or a little further up. Is there something that I should be looking for other than the 1%? I can't find 1% rules, but is there a certain, if I see something that looks like it will net me a decent, income, should I go after it? Is there something that, is there a reason these properties that are so below value that, I can fix it and flip it? Or can I just look for something that looks like a reasonable amount of income? Can
You
that
you
be added
can
to my
you can
portfolio?
because remember, we're the only reason that why we even have this 1% rule is because we're just trying to keep things simple. That's a simple rule. But now, because are so low, you can go beyond the 1% rule and still have a good
Mhm.
cash flowing property. Because, like, for example, on your rental now in DC, what's your interest rate on a investment loan? Four and a half,
Three,
four?
three,
Huh?
no, it's three something,
Yeah.
isn't
Okay.
it?
So now,
Three and
now,
seven eighths
now, now
maybe?
we're talking about an interest rate game, right? So I
Mhm.
would even, I wouldn't even. The 1% rule is good for us, right? Because we have a lot of properties, and that's just simple for us to keep it. But even the one we bought today, it was a 210 purchase, and the rent's 1750, but it needs absolutely no renovation work. So we're basically buying it, throwing a sign in the front yard, and putting a renter in there, right? But now our interest rates are going to be higher than yours. I think our interest rate on that product is going to be 4.5% at a 25-year AM. But if you're able to get an investment loan at three, let's say 3 7/8, three and
Mhm.
three quarters, the
Mhm.
1% rule, you can go above and beyond that. Now, the key for you though is you're trying to build long-term wealth. So you want to, as long as you're buying into value, that's the name of the game, right? Because with your interest rate so low, it's going to be a halfway decent cash flow because the interest rates being low on your debt service. But as long as you're buying into value, you're going to kill it. Like the purchase we had today, the 210 purchase on the rental, the ARV is like 290, 295. So we bought into about 20, 30% as far as a value standpoint. Now the cash flow isn't great because it's a 210 purchase. It's not a $2,100 a month rental. It's a 1750, but we don't care. We're fine. So did it solve, was it part of the 1% rule? Not really. We sort of went outside our bounds, and that same thing can work for you.
Mhm.
Just make sure you understand the rents and
Okay.
your corresponding debt service. So it'll work.
I
Got
think
it.
I've got a topic for our next one, which is I want to hear about this wholesale deal. I've got a kid in his 20s. It would be good for him as a retail user to get a condo out in Herndon or Reston or something like that. I want to find out about him maybe getting a wholesale because he can live there for a couple of years and then rent it out. And that's a whole other way of going. But I guess
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No,
That's a great
that's a
idea.
brilliant. No, that's a brilliant way to go. Just because let me just go through the numbers on this particular deal today. We bought it at 210 and it's worth 290, 295. I didn't tell you what the wholesaler bought it for.
150.
wow.
150. That's right. Just do the math. So
She
they
got
made
60 grand
They made
on
60
the day
grand.
she sold it.
Yep.
For
50%
basically no
profit.
money. She didn't have to put any significant money down, presumably. Just
No, no,
She
what are you
didn't-
talking about?
She didn't even own it. She
Come
didn't
on.
even own it. She just transacted it to us.
No, they
Right.
just assigned the contract, made $60,000. Yeah, it's great. So there's two ways to kill the stone, right? Number one, you can look for your rental, buy it from the wholesaler, or better yet, why don't you be the wholesaler and buy that property yourself and keep it yourself? Now it's a lot more work to be that wholesaler, as we know, and it's hard to find those good deals. But if you can find those good deals, go ahead, bam. And so in case of your son, there's no reason why he can't buy a place to live in from a wholesaler. That's a good strategy because they're out there spending, $60,000 is a lot of money, obviously. But what we didn't tell you is that this particular wholesaler, their advertising budget is probably 120,000, 150,000 a month. So we didn't tell you that. Plus they've got payroll too, so their expenses are very high. But they can afford to, spend that kind of money, get those kind of properties.
Yeah. Well, even for my son, the 210 would be fine.
Yeah,
It's he
Right,
can get a
right,
good loan, and even if and also
right,
don't confuse me with somebody who wants to do any work to actually find.
right,
I like the idea of
right.
just telling a wholesaler,
Yeah,
send me a deal in this range, and I don't mind if they make 50 grand. I'm going to give them a big
right.
handshake. Well,
That's
not
right.
anymore with COVID, but say, great for you, great for me. Everybody wins. The seller gets rid of the thing quickly and gets cash, and it's a win-win.
Yeah,
So
it's
I like
wonderful.
winning.
Yeah.
Winning.
This has been a lot of learning
Yes.
in this one. So
Yeah.
in future ones, we're thinking about doing little 8-minute segments or 6-minute segments of here's a quick lesson, and then go through the lessons and sort of break them up into ones that people can enjoy.
So
Yeah.
what you learned as opposed to just talking and babbling.
Yeah, so maybe we'll do that. We'll put a list of those together one day. And
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Well,
so
yeah, if we
also,
were actually prepared for this, we'd probably be even more coherent, or
That's a lot.
actually coherent, maybe not even more
That's just a lot.
coherent. So that's a good goal for us. There's a
Yeah.
lot of info. We just got to organize it and and put it into understandable chunks. But I mean, heck, I'm learning stuff. I learned some stuff today. The wholesale thing I hadn't really thought about. So
yeah,
it's
and
it's
single
good
use
good
entity
stuff.
LLC was another good
And the
one. Now,
single
also
use.
too, for you guys listening out there, send us an email, your story at basementtales.com. So it's YOURSTORY at basementtales.com. Give us maybe one of your stories, give us some feedback, maybe ask us some questions, and we'll simply cover it in a future podcast.
you have to really interrupt us. We've all agreed.
Yeah, just yell at us and preferably cursing.
No, because Ed is not cursing. When Ed doesn't curse, I definitely am not cursing. I'm not going to look like that person.
Well, that's a bunch of bullshit right there.
Yeah, right.